From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm NewsChannel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. It's been almost exactly 2 months since the deadly insurrection in Washington that saw the takeover of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. As the criminal investigation and hundreds of arrests from that event continue, there are renewed concerns about imminent new attacks of domestic terrorism inside the Beltway. So far, nothing has materialized, but congressional leaders and security officials are requesting thousands of National Guard troops stay on duty for the next 2 months to protect the Capitol. It's been a busy time for the new session of Congress and for the new Biden administration. To comment and reflect on what's going on in Washington, we've joined this week on Inside Politics by Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman, as always, we appreciate you taking the time and being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I just wish I could be with you on the set.
Well, one of these days we'll get you back here. It'd be good. We haven't had a guest here in a while on set. Before we begin our discussion, I would like to join everyone watching and extend our deepest sympathies and condolences to you in the recent loss of your wife, Martha. I know this has been a difficult time for you and your family.
Well, thank you, Pat, so much. As you know, she was a wonderful, wonderful lady. Just amazing. I was so lucky.
So far, this latest warning about acts of terror against the Capitol happening again and members of Congress have not materialized. I noticed the Senate is still in session. Does that mean they're not taking it as seriously as the House? The House went ahead and finished up its business early this week and went home. Should people be taking these threats seriously? Are you taking them seriously?
Well, there's never a good reason for violence. And I think the Capitol was underprepared for the January 6th events. And now we're probably over-prepared. For anybody who's been to Washington recently, and I just drove back from there yesterday. It's a long drive. There are 2 layers of fences. The fences seem 8 or 10 feet tall. They got razor wire on the top. It's kind of crazy because I haven't seen any demonstration or anything that even begins to challenge one of the fences, much less a double layer fence, and much less all the National Guardsmen who are there. So we're probably too well protected right now.
As you mentioned, these warnings are coming from from officials who sort of underplayed the threat back in January. Are they overplaying it this time, sort of covering their backsides early?
Well, I think they probably are, and it's good to be prepared. You know, I'm an Eagle Scout, so I think Boy Scouts believe in being prepared, but I think they're overdoing it this time.
It appears thousands of National Guard troops, as you mentioned, as we've mentioned, are going to be staying on there, and some other troops perhaps rotating in so they don't all have to stay there. The Capitol's not designed, the grounds are not designed to contain facilities to handle troops on site. So is this any way to run a government, or what are we going to do long term about this? We can't just keep going. You can't be going home every week every time there's some kind of threat that comes up.
Well, you know, with COVID, there are very few visitors now out of the Capitol. So I think the Guardsmen have been using the visitors' facilities, and that's great. And, you know, Guardsmen work hard all the time anyway, so I'm thankful that they're able to do some of their training at the U.S. Capitol. At least it's prettier than many military bases. And I'm thankful for their patriotic duty, because they really do a great job wherever they go.
Right as we began this taping, we found out that Steve Cohen, a fellow congressman of yours here from West Tennessee, has seen someone who threatened him indicted for trying to kill him, along with another congressman from Missouri. That happened back in 2019, the actual event that led to this indictment. But is it a sign that politics are kind of getting out of control, that we're polarized, and now it's going in a really wrong position in terms of actually making threats against members of Congress? Are you getting threats as well?
Well, I think if you check with country music stars and celebrities in general, and then to a lesser extent politicians, you'll see that all of those folks get periodic threats, and sometimes worse than that. Generally, we don't talk about it because that tends to popularize what's going on. And I'm sorry Steve was subjected to that. Nobody should be subjected to a death threat like that.
At this particular time, there's also concerns because of what happened on January 6th, some concerns that perhaps some members of Congress gave some inside help to people that turned out to be, they perhaps thought were visitors. They turned out to be the protesters that showed up there and ransacked the Capitol. Is there a lot more tension among members than we've seen in the past up there? This has not brought the Congress together, say the way 9/11 did.
Well, you know, when people are on camera, they tend to act uglier than they do when they're just walking side by side down a hallway or in the gym or in an informal setting like that. I think the first thing is none of my colleagues ever should have lied about the facts, and too many of them did. And they knew better privately. They've told me they didn't believe that Trump won the election, but they felt like they had to appease the radicals back home, their so-called base. So I think it starts with telling the truth. And then you've got to make sure that you don't aid and abet rebellion against the United States, because that attack on the Capitol was indeed vicious. Police officers died. So many people were hurt. It's tens of millions of dollars worth of property damage. And you don't foul your own nest. You don't damage your own Capitol. That was just totally wrong.
There's one new member of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's created quite a stir. She's been espousing some of the QAnon conspiracies, and including calls to assassinate Democratic leaders. She's been stripped of her committee assignments by the full House, but she's now tried several times, I understand, to try to adjourn the House during the middle of discussions. Even some members of the Republican Party, I understand, are now voting against her on that. She's reportedly also been harassing a Democratic colleague who has a bisexual child. Does the House seem to take further action against her?
Well, she's thriving on all this publicity, and that's a shame. I wish we could cut off the publicity, because that's the oxygen she breathes. There are always going to be people who act out and try to get publicity that way. I'm just sorry she's trying to do it, because the poor people of Georgia she's trying to represent, they're not well served by this. We need constructive lawmakers who try to find solutions to problems, not just people who yell and scream.
I mentioned the 9/11 attacks. After that happened back in 2001, about 20 years ago, the Congress came together. There was a bipartisan commission that studied what happened over 9/11 and made recommendations on what should happen in the future. There's been talk about that, but it seems to be getting fouled up in all the political disagreements up in Washington. Do we need such a commission, and why isn't it getting done?
Well, I think we do need such a commission. This is the worst attack on our Capitol since 1814 and the War of 1812, when the British burned the Capitol. Thankfully, the domestic insurrection we saw didn't get that far. But we were pretty lucky, because a lot of people could have died there. You saw senators running for their lives. You've seen the videotapes now. This was a terrible thing. The vice president himself was threatened with hanging. That's completely wrong. And we need to make sure that, first of all, lawmakers tell the truth, and so that people aren't feeding on lies. And Mitch McConnell himself said this on the Senate floor, and he's a big Republican. He said that the crowd was deliberately misled by the President of the United States. And that's not a Democrat talking. That's the top Republican in America today. So we need to get to the bottom of this. Everyone needs to understand what's true and what's false, and then we can proceed from there.
Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper is our guest on Inside Politics. Back to continue our conversation with him after you watch these messages.